everybody, and welcome to episode 103 of On the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And my name is Dan Alika, and I am AutoTrader's road test editor.
And I'm Sébastien Bell, and I am the associate editor at AutoTrader.
Hello, everybody.
Wait, you already did that part.
I know, but you guys. Sorry, guys. I'm just having a stroke over here. We were just talking about the fact that we're shooting this episode on a Friday, which is very rare for us. So this is like big Friday energy in the podcast studio today.
Yes.
Today, we are here to talk about Chinese EVs.
Yep.
Controversial topic in Canada.
Big topic.
And elsewhere. And we thought it was important that we should address this. We wanted to get to it sooner, but there's been a lot going on in the 100th and our awards episodes, and those were all important. So we thought this was a good time.
And Sun King, obviously.
Oh my God.
Super big priority.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
So we decided that now was the right time to talk about this as we sort of inch closer to Chinese EVs potentially coming to market. This is another big... there are so many caveats that come with this.
Well, and that is the nice thing about having waited a little bit is that we do get to early on, on January 16th, when Carney announced that 49,000 vehicles were going to be allowed into the country, everybody was just like, okay, cool. What does that mean, though?
Yes.
Yeah. There was a lot of knee-jerk hot takes that were going on. And so now that the dust has settled a little bit, I think we can kind of give you our perspective on first the facts, what the government says.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get into a bit of the pros and cons and what it might mean for you as a car shopper.
The first thing I think we need to talk about is the idea. Okay, two things that I want to get out there right off the bat.
That's true.
Number one, it's only 49,000 cars. To start,
growing to 70,000 in 5 years.
I understand, but even still, okay. Let's say that it's and let's say it's going up by 20,000 or 21,000 every 2 years from now until the end of time.
Totally.
We still moved 2 million vehicles in Canada last year. So this idea that I understand there are special interest groups and lobby groups that are working on behalf of automakers currently selling and operating in Canada that are vehemently opposed to this.
Totally.
But my idea is get your house in order. If this is a big threat to you, don't just put a wall up and say we can't allow that. Make your situation more appealing to consumers. That ultimately is the government's goal here.
Yeah.
But the other side of that I do want to talk about is that this idea that people think the market is suddenly going to be flooded with $15,000 EVs and we're going to be, it's like,
we should be so lucky.
Man.
Yeah.
That is an impossibility.
Yeah.
And part of it does come down to, expectations and safety standards and frankly, government control, right? With all of these, China is a very interesting economy, a very interesting political situation. There's so much government involvement in private enterprise there that the government subsidizes all of these, or not all of them, but many of these companies, and that's how EVs in China are cheap. They're not paying kind of retail price for a GAC, whatever. That is a heavily subsidized vehicle.
Totally. And that has long been one of the concerns. So I do think it's important to go back a little bit and talk about a little bit of the background on this. And I think that I was doing some research yesterday, and I think that it's important to talk about why we had a 100% tariff, or why all the vehicles up and above 40,000, 49,000 have a 100% tariff on them. And it's because at the time, the U.S. and Canada were friends.
Yes.
We were working together.
Right.
The halcyon days of Biden in the White House, which not a perfect president, but looks pretty good now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Canada and the U.S. were working together to create a North American supply chain to make EVs more feasible.
Yes.
That was when a lot of the investment was coming into London for Volkswagen's battery plant.
Yes.
Stellantis's battery plant, Honda's battery plant. That's when all of this stuff was coming up. So there was a plan to have primary resources from Canada, making batteries in Canada and the US, and then making cars all around North America, EVs all around North America.
Yeah.
This was the big plan, and this is when the U.S. decided to put a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs under the argument that they are subsidized, so we can't afford to compete. So effectively, we're going to do something similar and create our own sort of North American EV supply chain / industry and really get it up and running. So that's what happened. In 2024, as we all remember, a certain other person came into the White House. And I think it's important to state that not only did he impose tariffs on us, he also questioned our sovereignty, which is a directed, is an implied threat against our primary resources. He and in the U.S., he has attached environmental regulation and EV incentives, which makes EVs much less popular and makes them much harder to sell there. Effectively undoing all of the 4 years of planning that Trudeau and Biden did together. Now we are in a completely different situation, and we are faced with a primary trading partner that is aggressive against us. So I think that is the context in which we are looking at another way of doing things, and we're looking at different trading partners.
Now, that the other side of that is this is short term. Now, of course, there could be another Republican president, that follows Trump into the White House.
And boy, do I hope that there's another president after Trump.
But the reality is, just like automakers aren't making decisions based on 4-year presidential terms, the Canadian government can't be entirely dependent upon what's going to happen here, but it's sort of hedging bets, leveraging relationships. And then the other side of this is that Chinese EVs used to not be tariffed at 100%. And that was remember the cheap Model 3 from Tesla? That was made in China.
Totally.
And but it still wasn't that cheap. This is the thing, right? That the reality is all this technology is still expensive. People that misunderstand the auto industry and misunderstand EVs just say they're overpriced and well, an equivalent gas-powered vehicle is $10,000 or $15,000 less. And it's like, okay. But when you're talking about 120 years of history of development behind that gas-powered vehicle versus realistically 25 years, that's a major difference maker in how much. And Nissan said, okay, we're still working towards solid state batteries. However, the price per kilowatt hour of energy density in a battery pack is still about double what it needs to be in order to see low-priced EVs make it to market. So right now it's about $200 US per kilowatt hour, and the target is $100 per kilowatt hour. So it just goes to show you that it is a long road in the development process. And I think maybe a good analogy for this is the way that, textbooks, when you go away to school, some textbooks cost $200, $300 for that one single textbook. And then another one that is just as important for another course might only cost you $50 or $80. And part of the reason why is because that one that's only $50 or $80 has sold 10 million copies around the world. The licensing, all of that information that's in there that costs money has finally, amortized and it's paid for itself, and they can now drop the price of that textbook to make it more affordable. Cars are kind of the same way. No, they're not ever going to give them away for free, but they need these. I say it all the time. I said it on the last episode. The car companies aren't in the business of giving things away for free. They are there to make money. And the unfortunate reality is, to make money on an EV, it needs a higher price cap.
Totally. They're a very complicated machine. So setting up supply lines, setting up factories, just knowing how to engineer it properly is all really expensive and costs a lot of money.
Absolutely. But I also want to say one of the things we should talk about, because I do understand the idea of the threat or the perceived threat of China. I understand there's a bit of a boogeyman situation going on, right? That just like in Hollywood, when you watch through history, you see these different regions become the bad guy. Right. That's just how it works. And we used to see it, during the Cold War era.
The Russians.
Every bad guy in a movie had a Russian accent and probably a hammer and sickle on his hat somewhere. And we've gone through, Middle Eastern bad guys and Chinese this is just what happens, right?
Totally.
So I want to know what you guys, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but how you feel about the idea of this threat,
It's so, I think, so first of all, I think that there is a reality in which there is a real possibility in which U.S. hegemony is coming to an end and Chinese hegemony starts taking over as the dominant superpower in the world. And that is complicated. And that is like, whatever, that is complicated. I think that all of the information that I've seen, the most recent articles I've read where people are like, we shouldn't allow Chinese EVs on military bases. We should follow what Poland's doing and what Israel are doing. And all of the reasoning is like, well, they must have a reason.
Yeah.
And so far, I haven't seen anybody be like, what the reason is. And I understand that modern vehicles are highly connected and they can connect to things. And I can understand why it is a good idea for a military to maintain certain secrets. However, all of the arguments are kind of just like, well, we should because we should.
Yeah.
And that, I don't mean to say that we shouldn't be careful, but I am going to say that is not convincing reasoning.
Yes. I agree with that. But, well, Jodi, what's your...
Well, I was just going to say, so AutoTrader did a bunch of research on Canadian sentiment towards Chinese EVs, right? And this is a new thing. So I think 50% of the respondents in that AutoTrader survey have concerns about data privacy, which is a very real concern, especially when you're dealing with a government that has historically not paid a lot of attention to human rights, right?
Yeah.
So other respondents also said that this is a moot point because car companies that we know and trust are already harvesting and selling our data, our phones, our laptops, whatever. They're already doing that. So why single out
that have historically poor human rights?
Exactly. So why single out China? I think there's a little bit of like xenophobia happening.
Yeah, certainly.
But it's also very new. So it's going to take a lot of like Chinese automakers, I think, have an uphill battle to like earn people's trust.
Yeah.
And kind of prove that like they're not this boogeyman, but I'm not sure.
Like, I don't mean to say that there's a benefit to xenophobia because there isn't. It's bad. It shouldn't be allowed. However, if we're having a conversation about data security and we like bang that drum and improve data security by accident, like maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but the other, I guess, maybe to play devil's advocate here.
Devil's avocado.
I do look at the idea of, there's a reason why the Canadian federal government disallowed Huawei, which is a Chinese company, from upgrading our national cellular network to 5G. And part of it was, and it wasn't a reason just for a reason. It was a national security reason, right? And when you have, I think the problem that I understand people's perspective is, companies as companies are already not doing a good job protecting our data, but
that doesn't mean that we should throw in the towel.
Exactly, because especially, again, going back to what I said earlier, once you have government control or government involvement in a company, that is where it becomes a very dangerous issue for a lot of people. And I understand that perspective of being like, okay, let's use Ford as an example, right? Sure. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, or Bill Ford, the second or whatever iteration they're on now. These
like the Mustang too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
These head honchos could be bad dudes with bad intentions, whatever. But they're just I don't want to say they're just business leaders, but they're business leaders, and they're not also running a shadow army. Whereas I think the concern with China is that when and if those government, spies and whatever, these guys have a seat at the table and go, okay, so I see this doomsday scenario as you pump a bunch of EVs into the market and then suddenly they have remote access to these vehicles. And the idea of shutting down the grid, just like the idea of being able to shut down or spy on the 5G network. And that's why the contract wasn't given to Huawei. I do see that. And the proof, or at least some evidence towards this, is that in Norway last year, so the government does testing just like they would with anything, including on buses, their public transit system. And so they ordered a bunch of buses, Chinese-made electric buses in Norway, because Norway is way ahead of the game on going emissions-free.
Yeah.
Part of this testing is driving these buses underground. They drive them in tunnels, and that's how they test the data security of these and their connectivity. They found that the Chinese-made buses could still be theoretically remotely accessed and shut down from China versus buses made by this Dutch company that could not be controlled. A, they couldn't be controlled remotely, and B, once they were underground, there was no more connectivity. Like the Dutch company couldn't see what was going on with these buses once they were in these underground tunnels. And the Chinese-made buses, the company could still see and remotely access them.
Right.
So I think, does that just amplify the fear? Yeah, maybe. But to me, this might be one of those where there's smoke, there's fire situations, you know?
It is hard to, it's a hard one to argue about because the lack of evidence in a lot of cases becomes evidence.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, we don't know what they're doing and we don't know what they're doing. And that is true. And also, like, I don't want to make the argument that data security, like, I think that a private company having access to all of my data is as bad as a government having access to all.
Absolutely.
Like, and I think that they're both bad. So being like, well, you know, and also I think that I don't want to fall into just like, well, we might as well just give up on everything because I think that data security is a big deal. I think that it is a huge problem that we are barreling into and we have not a lot of information about. And
but okay, sorry, just as a sort of adjacent point, right? Is that so? I went to Vietnam a few years ago, and you know I travel a lot. And modern travel, your phone is such a great companion because it means it can help with translation and it can help with directions and whatever. So I remember getting there, and I wanted to go for a walk, and I opened Google Maps, and it wasn't loading properly. Like it would load the map, but then when I tried to put directions in, it wasn't working. And I thought, oh, it's just one of those things. It's not connecting properly. Tried it again, nothing. Tried it again, nothing. And then I searched it. I Googled it, and Google Maps doesn't work in Vietnam. It's one of the countries it doesn't work, specifically because the Vietnamese government says the only way that you can do that is if you store the data locally.
Right.
Now, glass half full, that's the Vietnamese government protecting Vietnamese citizen data by saying, well, we don't want our data being stored. We don't know what the hell you're doing with it.
I mean, by somebody who has attempted to invade their country. So
so that's my thing, right? Is I understand, but the I guess maybe the approach from Google is being like, well, we don't know what you're going to do if you have access to that data locally. Why are you making us and to me it is an adjacent point to make that if a country, so China is the same way with, it took years for, don't even want to use the name, but Tesla's advanced driving systems weren't fully functioning in China because it was housing all of that data at its data centers in the US.
Right.
And the Chinese government said, no, the only way we'll allow you to do that is if you have those data centers in China. And Tesla finally relented, I think 2 years ago. And now if you own a Tesla in China, you can have this misnamed full self-driving and whatever. These to me, there are implications that we don't necessarily know what they are, but it's still scary. I'm not trying to use it as a boogeyman, but it's like there's, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
And I look at this bus situation with Norway. I mean, this isn't like the Chinese EVs are all over Norway, buses, cars, whatever. It doesn't matter. So it's not like some special interest group being like, whoa, this is really scary.
Totally.
This is a Norwegian transportation authority being like, we got a bit of a problem here.
No, fair enough. And absolutely. I think the data sovereignty is a big deal and should be taken seriously. But the reality is that we don't know what CSIS is doing right now.
Of course.
So international espionage notwithstanding.
Yeah. I have my apprehensions or my fears because of what we don't know.
Totally.
But I do think that competition is healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And just from a more consumer standpoint. So the whole idea behind this was to introduce more affordable EVs into our country.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say that expecting bargain basement pricing is not going to happen.
No.
These EVs are expected to be between $35,000 and $40,000, which in terms of EVs is a great price because that's a lot more affordable than what we currently have.
Yeah.
But if you're going into this thinking that you're going to buy a $20,000 EV, that is just not going to happen. And yes, Chinese automakers are now ahead of the American and other automakers in terms of tech. Chinese automakers were the first to publicly start selling solid-state batteries. We probably won't get those here because our Chinese EVs here are going to be more affordable, which means we're not going to get access to that crazy tech until probably later years.
Yeah. And that's assuming it works, right? This is one of those things where just like anything, whether it's automotive related or not, this isn't a case of if you build it, they will come. They need to be the right products. They can't just be the right price.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They need to do the job. If you're getting these cheap EVs that the range sucks, the features suck, the build quality, and I'm not saying these are all going to happen. I'm just saying a what if scenario. Well, how is that going to – I don't think you're going to see even that 49,000 – sure, they can bring 49,000 into the country. That doesn't mean 49,000 are going to be sold. And a good example, and I hate the fact that it's another Asian – company, but it's just a good example. VinFast. VinFast, was able to bring cars into the country starting 4 or 5 years ago. How many do you think they've sold?
Yeah, so the thing is, when you're an automaker who comes here into an established marketplace with an audience that doesn't know anything about you, you're going to have to beat them on a few things, and pricing is one of them.
Yes. Yeah.
VinFast pricing was not super competitive. It was very expensive. And to be honest, the products were very mid. They were very average, sub-average
It's
products.
why it took Hyundai look at Hyundai is now one of the biggest brands in North America.
But it took them a long time.
It took so long, and people still talk about the Pony and what a piece of junk it was, but what it had going for it was that it was affordable. Next to a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla, it was cheap. So at least it had that in its favor. And then the products got better. Right? The lineup got bigger. They started building vehicles that made more sense for this market. And now look at what a success story it is.
Totally.
That's what needs to happen. Now, there is also the flip side of it is that Volvo and Tesla, and there are established companies that are already there that have a foothold in the North American market.
Totally.
That we can see those vehicles make a comeback.
Totally. Make a big comeback, and they have, you can already produce them. But I think that's a big advantage to a company like Geely, who, for the first half of this year, when the first wave of EVs built in China come to Canada, I think you're right. It's probably going to be brands that we recognize. It's probably going to be Polestars, Volvos, and Teslas. But Volvo has a dealership group, so that's a big advantage to Geely's Chinese
Absolutely,
brands.
Because that's another thing. And I saw some reports about dealer networks opening in North America. Or in Canada, sorry. I know we talked about this before about the odds. Somebody, I think it was an Ask an Expert question about will we see Chinese automakers at next year's round of auto shows.
That was Baruch accurate, actually.
It was Baruch,
yes.
Okay. But my thing was, I said at the time, was that had Carney made that announcement not on January 16th, but on December 16th, we would have seen Chinese automakers at this year's Canadian auto shows.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, BYD, Chery, and Geely are the front runners to bring cars here. And interestingly, BYD also, in this AutoTrader survey they did about EV sentiment, BYD's brand recognition shot up by 10% over last year just because of this, right?
I was talking to Baruch, and he said that their brand recognition was higher than Nissan's.
They're higher than for EVs. Their BYD's brand recognition was higher than Nissan, BMW. It's equal to Honda.
Yeah.
And that's crazy for a brand that doesn't even exist here yet, for them to be making that many waves.
I mean, and maybe, you know, I think everything that's been happening, because look, the world, you know, it's flat. Like you can see what's going on elsewhere. The internet is
about a flat earth.
No, but you know what I mean.
Oh my God,
you know what I mean. Like we're not in this walls up kind of thing, right?
Totally,
Globalization means that we know what's going on elsewhere. BYD has been doing its thing in China, and it's starting to
and Europe and
exactly. And it's starting to trickle into Europe, and so I think that helps. It's made it, you know, it's given it that kind of preemptive established name here, but you still need to prove it with the products. The other thing they're going to have to do is rename some of these cars.
Oh, for sure. A lot
like
of those
the
names
seal
are
and stuff.
lost in translation.
Nobody's buying a Dolphin.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now.
I would buy a Dolphin.
Nobody's buying a Dolphin.
I like the Dolphin. I think it's a nice name.
It's cute. But just to put this in perspective, like BYD is now the world's top selling maker of electric cars.
But okay, I agree with that, right? But again,
it is a fact.
It's a fact.
It's a fact. But my point is just that if you were to take away the subsidies in China, if you were to take away, because it's just like, okay, when the recession hit and still or whatever, what Fiat Chrysler at the time and General Motors had to be bailed out by the Canadian and US governments in order to survive, right? That was our governments propping up our local auto industry. If China wasn't doing the same for its local auto industry, BYD would not be the biggest electric vehicle maker in the world. Because again, it's not a case of if you build it, they will come. Yes, the response in China, the stuff that I've read, a lot of it, the reason why the likes of BYD have been able to work their way to the top, you know, surpassing Tesla, which used to be the top seller in China, surpassing Porsche, is because people like the idea of a homegrown brand, locally built. So I get all of that, but that also means you are going to face that kind of pushback in North America. And Canada is one of those. Yes, there is a group that wants these affordable EVs. Those are the ones who are going to be disappointed by these prices. That's just a reality, because you could go out, I'm sorry, but if you can go out and buy, and I know it's a one and done sort of situation, but if you could go buy the new Chevy Bolt, which you just tested
next week,
you're looking at a relatively affordable EV with some name recognition. But just like before, range isn't all that great. It's kind of quirky. Like the same flaws are there, but it's built in North America. So why, like, I don't understand why people think that these Chinese, right now it feels like people think it's like this, you know, this like star that's going to shoot in and save us all. And I'm like, but they're going to have the same flaws, because to your point, in order to be cheap, they can't be the best ones that these companies are making right now.
Yeah, and so like it's yet to be seen, because I have not driven a Chinese vehicle, and so like I don't know what the quality is like. I don't know what the range is like. I don't know what it's gonna like, how they're gonna meet our safety standards and this and that.
Which is another huge question mark right now.
But is one of the advantages to them is that one of the big advantages for Chinese companies entering Canada, sorry to interrupt, is that our safety regulations are harmonized with the US. Yes. So once they do that, not that they'll have access, but they have an easier entry. It's like, it is the start of a pathway into the US.
Of course. And then just the follow on to that though, right, is that I know, because I think your point is that the vehicles already test really well. They do really, but here's the big difference that people don't quite grasp yet, is that they have these great technologies that are often, you know, in independent testing are surpassing the standards set by European and North American and Korean and Japanese cars. But the difference is our safety standards are higher. So the point is that they don't have to build cars that way for the Chinese market. So they have these technologies, but they're not necessarily integrated within every vehicle that's built. Whereas in North America, the car has to pass those safety standards, which means those cheapest ones. It's the reason why there are cars. Mexico is you know, I mean, it's part of Kuzma. We have this longstanding relationship. There are a bunch of cars that are sold in Mexico that aren't sold in Canada and the US. Why? Because they can't meet our crash testing standards. That's the simple reality. Yeah. They're cheap, but I don't want to use the term death traps, but they're more dangerous.
They're less safe, yeah.
It is, and that is one of those unknowns again, where it's like we need to make sure that what's coming here meets those standards. I mean, they have to in order to make it here, but then it's like, well, what does that mean in terms of cost?
Yeah, well, my understanding is to the point that it's not going to be a magic bullet, nor do I think it'll be the end of civilization as we know it.
No.
I think it'll be, I think that there are alarmists on either side.
Yes.
But my understanding is from the reviews that I've seen is that the Chinese EVs aren't necessarily $15,000. They aren't that way. But the $45,000 EVs that they are selling are equivalent to $75,000
sure.
EVs.
But again,
that's the way in which they're cheap, not necessarily.
Yeah. I just think we need to see that because everybody talks about this, right? And I mean, a lot of this in comment sections and stuff is about these prices. And I'm like, but they're all right now, those are all just people pulling prices out of the sky.
Right.
And like I've said to other people about this, there's still going to be a cost to get them here. You can't just go because one of the go-tos is like, well, look, I did a cost conversion and this is how much it would cost in Canada. And I'm like, okay, but they're not just gonna. It's not a 1-for-1.
Yeah.
Right. The freight charge suddenly has to get factored in.
Yeah.
Right. The dealer network that's got to again. These are companies that are out to make money, so they need to amortize and they need to say, okay, well, we're looking at paying off this big investment that we've made. So each car, you're looking at another, I don't know, $2,000 that's going to be tacked on top of the price to pay for establishing this dealer network and all that. Like, so I'm still in a cautiously optimistic position about what this means for the future, but I hope it means just like Tesla did for the Detroit 3, that it's going to make the rest of the industry that's gotten kind of complacent in terms of market dominance is going to go, oh, we need to step it up.
Yeah. And I think that competition will be good for the industry in general. I don't think it's like the big emergency that everyone's making it out to be, but a little bit of competition didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go on about this issue for forever. There's so many different facets and it's such a complex issue. If any of you have questions or, you want to share your pros and cons or concerns about having Chinese EVs in Canada, you can email us at expert@trader.ca.
Wait, before you go to the Ask an Expert, can I say one of the best things, Chinese or otherwise, about EVs? There's nothing wrong with using remote start.
That's so true.
For those of you who listened to the last episode will know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, go back and listen to that one. And now it's time for our Ask an Expert. No. It's time for a message from your friends at AutoTrader.
Hey.
We at Own the Road love making car stuff simple for Canadians, and the AutoTrader app does the exact same thing. Sign up for price drop notifications, find out how much your car is worth, get an instant cash offer from a vetted dealership, get all your expert advice, and more. Download the AutoTrader app today. Today's Ask an Expert comes from Robert. So he writes in that he does not have enough money for another car, and in his current car, they have told him that the compression is low. Would you recommend buying another car for around $2,500? I just want to say that for $2,500, I don't think that'll get you a lot of car with no problems.
Seb did a quick scan of the AutoTrader marketplace yesterday. And so, of course, by the time you're listening to this, these aren't going to be, around. But the point being,
I saw the words "as is" a lot.
Yeah.
$2,500 just doesn't go as far as it used to.
Yeah. It might be better just to invest that into fixing your current car.
Yeah, Robert, I mean, I understand car repairs are expensive, and I don't, without the context of what you're driving, the age of it, the mileage, all of that stuff, it's hard to say for sure, but $2,500 could fix many compression-related issues.
Yeah, totally.
I can't think of something that would, unless it's, your intake, your exhaust, your gaskets, like it's a whole rework, then maybe it's going to cost you more than $2,500 to fix. But I know it sucks. I mean, Seb, your stepdad, I think it was, did this episode about like finding that at what point does it make sense to buy a new vehicle versus fix the old one, right?
That is what I was going to say, is that, I think that to know what's worth more, you're going to have to know how much you're going to spend on repairs.
Yes.
And to your point, $2,500 is not a lot for a vehicle. Robert asks at the bottom of the question that, like, what are the must-haves for a car that's $2,500? And I think running well. Is the
running
major.
period.
Safety. Because to Seb's point, buying a vehicle that says as is, I mean, that's a disclaimer that has to be in there to say that this car has not been certified. It's not safetied. It might cost, so sure, you might get that car for $2,500.
Yeah.
It could cost you a couple grand more to get it safetied, or
who knows?
It might not be able to be safe for the road.
Yeah. And that's just always a risk you have when like $2,500, not a lot of budget.
Yeah, and to your point, I think $2,500 should know a long way to fixing an engine.
Yes.
Who knows? But I think that you do need to spend. You need to make the investment into finding out exactly what it's going to cost.
So, Robert, I would say I would maybe look at both. Maybe go to the marketplace, have a look at what's out there in your area just to get an idea of what you could buy. But then also call 2 or 3 different shops. Bring them that, I don't ever want to see somebody kind of take business from somebody who's already started the work or whatever. But if you get a quote from that initial shop that's told you that you have this compression issue, find out how much it would cost, and then call around to a couple other mechanics and say, hey, what would it cost me to get these repairs done to get the most bang for your buck? And then make that decision based on the numbers for both buying something new. But just remember that a $2,500 car could end up costing you a lot more just to get it roadworthy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Robert, for your question. Let us know how it goes, or like maybe give us more context into like what you're driving, or like how long you've had it for. Maybe we can answer your question a little bit better. If any of you have questions you would like to ask us, you can email expert@trader.ca. But that closes out this episode. Thank you so much for being here with us. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.